A tiny force against a massive empire. A narrow mountain pass holding back the largest army the world had ever seen. You've heard the story, right? The 300 Spartans. But have you ever stopped to wonder how a complete military defeat became one of the most legendary stories in history? Well, let's dig in and break down the strategy, the sacrifice, and the sheer guts that turned a loss into a legend. I mean, just look at the matchup here. On one side, you've got the Greek hoplite. We're talking head-to-toe bronze armor, a disciplined warrior fighting to defend his home. And on the other side, the whole might of the Persian Empire. This wasn't just an army. It was a force pulled from all over the known world, all marching for one man, the god King Xerxes. The difference in scale is, well, it's almost hard to wrap your head around. So, to face this tidal wave of an invasion, what did the Greek city-states manage to pull together? About 7,000 men. Yep, that's it. 7,000 soldiers to stand against an empire. It was just a fraction of the troops they could have gathered, but for a bunch of complicated reasons, it was all they could send at that moment. And what exactly were they facing? Look, ancient historians talked about millions of soldiers, which was probably an exaggeration. But even the modern conservative estimates put Xerxes' army at well over 150,000 troops. You do the math. That's an insane disadvantage. We're talking more than 20 to 1. The odds weren't just bad, they were impossible. So that's the big question, isn't it? How on earth could this tiny army even think about stopping that machine? Well, the Greek plan was never about matching numbers. It was about using geography, better training, and just pure, stubborn nerve. But to really get why they were so determined, we need to rewind the clock a little. This whole thing didn't just happen overnight. Yeah, this invasion wasn't some random event. It was the explosive finale to decades of bad blood, open rebellion, and a Persian king's thirst for some serious revenge. So here's the quick version. It all started when Athens helped some Greek cities in Turkey rebel against Persia. Big mistake. The Persian king, Darius, was furious and demanded that all of Greece submit to him, the symbolic offering of earth and water. Athens and Sparta basically told him to get lost. This led to the first invasion, which, incredibly, the Athenians managed to stop at the Battle of Marathon. 10 years later, Darius' son Xerxes is on the throne. And he's brought an army like nothing the world has ever seen to avenge his father's defeat and burn Greece to the ground. And when I say they refused, I mean their actions spoke way louder than words. In Athens, they actually put the Persian messengers on trial and executed them. And in Sparta, they just chucked them down a well. This wasn't a simple no. This was a profound insult, an act of total defiance that pretty much guaranteed a second, much, much bigger war. All right, so let's jump back to 480 BC. Xerxes' army is marching south, and the Greeks know they can't possibly win a fight in an open field. It would be a slaughter. Their only shot was to pick the perfect piece of ground, a place where their enemies' numbers wouldn't matter. And they found that place at Thermopylae. They chose this spot. Thermopylae. The name actually means hot gates because of some nearby hot springs. Now, the coastline looks really different today. It's receded for miles. But back then, this was an incredibly narrow path, squeezed right between the mountainside and the sea. A natural bottleneck. And this geography was the key. It was the entire Greek strategy. The pass was so tight that the Persians couldn't use their overwhelming numbers. It didn't matter if they had 150,000 soldiers if they could only squeeze a few hundred into the pass at a time. This genius move turned one massive battle into a series of smaller, much more manageable fights. There's a military term for this, It's called a force multiplier. The terrain itself made the small Greek army way, way more effective. It leveled the playing field. But the ground was only half the equation. The other half was how these Greeks were trained to fight. See, these two armies couldn't have been more different. The Greeks fought in a phalanx. Think of it as a human wall of overlapping bronze shields and 9-foot-long spears. A walking tank. The Persian infantry, on the other hand, was much more lightly armed, with wicker shields and shorter spears. In an open field, they were fast and deadly. But in this narrow pass, they were forced to charge straight into a meat grinder of Greek bronze and iron. And for 2 straight days, the plan worked. It worked perfectly. The Persians threw wave after wave of soldiers at the Greek line, including their elite royal guards, the 10,000 immortals. And they just got cut down. The historian Herodotus tells us that Xerxes himself leaped up from his throne in terror 3 times as he watched his very best troops get slaughtered. Before the battle even started, Xerxes demanded the Greeks lay down their weapons. The Spartan King Leonidas gave maybe the most famous two-word reply in military history, molon labe. Basically, come and get 'em. For 2 long days, the Persians tried, and they failed. The Greek position seemed absolutely unbreakable. But then, on the evening of that second day, everything changed. And it wasn't because the Greek line broke. It was because of a betrayal. A local guy, a man named Ephialtes, saw a chance to get rich. He went straight to the Persian king and told him about a hidden path, a little-known track that went up and over the mountains and came out right behind the Greek army. For this act, his name, Ephialtes, would eventually become the Greek word for nightmare. You can see why. So Xerxes immediately sent his elite immortals up this path. They marched through the night, completely bypassing the main Greek line. By dawn on the third day, the trap was sprung. The defenders were about to be surrounded. Their brilliant strategy had been completely undone. Leonidas knew instantly that the position was lost. It was over. But to stop the entire Greek army from being wiped out, he made an incredible decision. He ordered most of the Greeks to retreat, to get away and live to fight another day. But he and a small force would stay behind. They would form a rear guard and buy the retreating army time with their lives. And this is where the popular legend of the 300 needs a little clarification. Leonidas stayed with his 300 Spartans, absolutely, but they were not alone, and this is so important. 700 soldiers from the city of Thespia refused the order to leave. They voluntarily chose to stay and die alongside the Spartans. There were also about 400 Thebans who remained, though historians question if they did so willingly. So, with the main army escaping to safety, this small doomed rearguard prepared to make the Persians pay as dearly as possible for the ground they stood on. And in doing so, they were about to turn a military defeat into an immortal legend. On that third day, they were hit from the front and the back at the same time. The remaining Greeks fought with absolute desperation. They fought until their long spears shattered. Then they drew their short swords. And when their swords broke, Herodotus tells us they fought on with their bare hands and their teeth, until every single one of them was killed. The Persians had won the pass, but the price was staggering. They lost an estimated 20,000 men just to kill around 4,000 Greeks. So, yes, it was a victory for Xerxes, but it proved to the rest of Greece that the Persian army was not invincible. It proved that they could be hurt, and hurt badly. An epitaph was later put up at the battlefield. The inscription honoring the Spartans is so simple yet so powerful. Friend, tell Lacedaemon, here we lie, obedient to our orders. Their sacrifice did way more than just buy a little time. It created an electrifying symbol of resistance that inspired all of Greece, paving the way for the decisive victories that would ultimately save their civilization. Which brings us right back to that first question. How can a total defeat become one of the most inspiring stories ever told? Militarily, Thermopylae was a loss. They lost the pass. But the story of their defiance, of sacrificing everything for the idea of freedom, that transformed the loss into something far more powerful. It became a victory of the spirit, a timeless example of courage against impossible odds. And that's why, 2,500 years later, we still remember their name.